Welcome back to Digital Tutors. In this lesson, we're going to talk about some of the things to really think about when it comes to your documentary style action footage and editing that. Because we've already covered fiction and the lovely bits of repeated action that have been choreographed and how that works. And in documentary, you have different issues, different problems. Mainly the fact that this wasn't scripted. This all happened. Basically, we filmed somebody while she was training, tried to get as much coverage as possible, always thinking of the edit when we were shooting, because you always want to make sure that you give your editor enough to cut with. But that's a little bit trickier of a prospect in the world of documentary than it is in fiction, because you can't really just plan it all out. As things are happening, you have to go through and find those different coverages. So the one thing that you always want to keep in mind when you're going through documentary footage as an editor in that first step is a lot of times you'll have multiple different framings within one shot. So you don't just look at the first frame of a shot that was made for a documentary and assume that it represents the rest of what's on that shot. You might have a couple of different medium shots, a long shot, some different close-ups, all within one shot. So you have to make sure, again, that you've gone through all of your footage and performed a good string out, which we've already talked about. And here it is. Here's the string out of all of the footage, the shots that I in particular like. There are more than this that could be used. However, these are just the ones that I've decided that I'm going to put into my timeline here. Now, we've already gone through the process of making a rough cut from that string out, and we've actually already started putting some of it together. If you see here, I have a couple of different sections as well. So let's just walk ourselves through what I've been doing with this rough cut. Again, just like with the fiction footage, you have to decide how you're going to bring your audience into this scene, into this story. And in this case, instead of showing them a wide shot of her, because we're trying to create interest, we're trying to get people to start paying attention to, we're doing this more inductively. We start off with the close-up of her feet jumping up and down, and then we're going to match that action to her, this kind of sort of three-quarter rear shot of her hand in the jump rope, and then to this rear shot with this nice little rack focus, so that what we're doing is we're intriguing the audience a little bit at the beginning, giving them another hint, and then revealing who this is and what she's doing in a kind of artistic way, because we start off looking at the back of her again, and as the camera moves a little bit to the right and rack focuses, now we see her for the first time, albeit in a long shot. So it's kind of just a more psychological, intriguing way to bring your audience into this scene. Then we have a close-up of her again, getting her ready. She's running around, she's starting to punch, and again, we're starting off with these close-ups, giving some details, jumping out to a long shot to see where we are and what's happening, then punching in, getting a little bit closer, and you can see all of the different things that she's doing. So this was just my first attempt at kind of putting it together into some form of an edit. And so again, just see how we took all this footage, which was done in different times, and put it together. Now, the one thing that I will say is having this little transition of her wrapping her hands, that was obviously not done here. That was done first, because if you look at these shots, her hands are already wrapped. So you would have to decide if you want to do that. I wouldn't open up with these two shots because they're not the strongest. This one's intriguing, so you could actually open up with this shot, then cut to the close-up of her, then cut to her feet. But I feel like that doesn't have as much intrigue as starting with the feet jumping up and down. We don't know that she's a fighter. We just know that she's somebody jumping rope. And so this is a little bit more of an intriguing way to start that edit. And again, that's what you're doing with your rough cut of documentary. You're just taking those shots from the string out, cutting them up even more, putting them into some kind of order to tell a story. And then I have this little spacer here. I have a tendency to put little spacers in between my edits just to differentiate different chapters, if you will, different parts of the footage. And here we have, again, another little transition shot of her and her trainer as he's kind of tightening up her gloves. Move through, to a super extreme long shot. Really kind of interesting. If you just started with this one, it might be a little bit harder. And you can tell that when we were shooting, we were hoping that she was going to end up right in front of the window to be a nice little silhouette, but her trainer did. So that's what we got. That's the nature of documentary. So it's not the strongest shot in the world, but using this part of it when he's there is all right. Once he walks away, it doesn't become an interesting shot anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that shot from that point on because I'm not going to use it probably. And again, moving back in closer, you can also notice that in my rough cut, I'm trying to maintain the direction of the characters. She is on the right, he is on the left. She is on the right, he is on the left. We move into the close-up, and they have switched. So that's going to be a potential jump cut right there. But you don't know. Maybe there's an interview in between those two. Just realize that that is going to be a potential jump cut. But now she's on the left, he's on the right. She's on the left, he's on the right. She's on the left, he's on the right. In this shot, he starts to kind of move to the right, so I probably wouldn't use that again. So you're going to go through here and just kind of find those points where you're cutting on that action. So this, for example, our next shot is a punch. You're going to want to try to cut on that action again. Don't cut to where she stands down again. That's boring. It's not going to intrigue anybody. So find those moments in here, in your rough cut, to try to chop on the action and take it to the next shot, because that will be a lot more dynamic. You see, it already flows a lot better there. These are also really long shots, and in a promo piece like this where you're trying to drum up energy, you don't want super long takes. You want things to move pretty quickly. So this, for example, instead of being that long, I might cut that in half. Have her hit, and then cut to the next one. So go through all of this and do that same thing. Look at your footage and figure out what parts of these individual shots you already want. See? This part flows much more interestingly now. Might be a little bit too quick, but we'll deal with that in the next one. And again, we have a couple of different options here from our string out. We have this shot, or we have this shot. You're not going to use both of them. Between the two, I like this second one better, because if you watch them, yeah, it's punching, it's boxing, but this one is a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that other shot. And again, don't worry about it. You can always chop to your heart's content because it's still here in my string out. Keep moving. Nice. There we go. Thinking about all of this. I also wouldn't go from this shot to this shot because that would definitely be a jump cut. So you're going to go through here and just kind of chop away at the ones. And I like this shot better than this one. Well, I like them for different reasons. This one's a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more interesting. She's moving across. It's good. This one you actually can focus on what she's doing, so you see a lot more technique in that shot. So it depends on what you want to show. And so I'll leave that for you to have fun with. Again, always maintaining our action, cutting on the action, matching action as much as possible, which is a lot harder to do. There are a few of these where she definitely matches action. This was a very repetitious part. And you see she's doing the same thing over and over again. But again, we have a potential jump cut between that and this. So you can match the action there, but it's not going to feel as natural because it's going to be flipped on the screen. And then lastly, you have to figure out, how do we end this scene? How do we end this shot? We've already talked about how you open it. The ending is really, really important too. You also notice in the fiction footage that there is no real ending. So we'll have to craft a cute little one onto the end of that. But you're always looking for how to wrap things up. And something like this, it can either be, a lot of times people do a freeze frame or something like that to just freeze the action. That might be a little bit hokey. It would probably fit the fiction a lot better than the documentary in this case, because that footage is nice and hokey. But in this case, we have all this action. We have a couple of options. We can show her resting and talking. We can show this close-up of her wiping her brow a little bit, which is, a sign of, oh, I've worked very hard and now I'm ready to kind of either go to the next step or pause. I personally really like this as the ending, this shot. It's her again by herself, alone. It's a cool down. She's still doing stuff, gets to a certain point, bell rings, and she starts to walk away. Now, the end of that shot isn't really that great because he comes out, but you could do a slow little fade out on there, and then that is a good way to end the scene, in my estimation, because what you're doing is you're letting your audience relax a little bit after having put them through the ringer. So go through, make this rough cut a lot shorter. Right now it's about 1.5 minutes. Try to make it like 45 seconds. See what you can do with it, and then when you're ready, come on back for the next lesson.